Good morning, everybody, and we'll remind you again, I guess, about the camera risers. I didn't realize that that was an issue. Thank you, Steve, for introducing me. Good morning or good afternoon to you all. It's great to see you here at this extraordinary book festival, which is, the spirit of it is wonderful, and glad to see all you book lovers here this morning. I'm very pleased to be introduced by Steve. This morning in the Washington Post, he has a more than a full-page article about the very terminus of the Keystone XL pipeline, a great story about the refining side. So recommend it all to you this morning. Is the sound okay, everybody? Great. On the early morning hours of August 2nd, 1990, Iraqi tanks rolled into Kuwait City and in an effort to annex Kuwait and make it the 13th province of Iraq. Not long after that, really within hours, a meeting was convened at the White House by President George H.W. Bush, and there was much discussion about what to do about it. And some said we should prepare for what he was called a Kuwaitless world and just adjust to it in some way. And President Bush raised his hand and said, not so fast, and of course unfolded then the coalition, the Gulf War in 1991, which seemed to presage a new era of stability in world oil. Well, just a few days after that invasion, I was finishing my page proofs actually for the prize, and I had to write the conclusion. And I wrote that the modern and mesmerizing alchemy of oil would continue to work its effects on the world, and that ours would continue to be an age of oil. Well, that was 2 decades ago, and as Steve said, a lot has happened since then. And I could just itemize some of them that are significant. There's no longer a Soviet Union. Young people in the audience will probably not even remember the Soviet Union or only have a dim memory of it. There's no Cold War. When I finished the prize, China wasn't a force in world energy. All it was a minor exporter of oil. Climate change was not a political issue at all. No one had heard of shale gas. If it had any name at all, it was known as uneconomic gas. Oil as late as 2004 was $20 a barrel, and it was going to remain $20 a barrel forever, and then it began its ascent. And even more recently, if we were meeting here not in September of 2012, but on March 10th, 2011, we might well have been talking about the nuclear renaissance. The next day came the terrible accident at Fukushima and the end of the nuclear renaissance and what we have today, what might be called a nuclear patchwork. And of course, the Middle East was going to be the same forever, but it has been upended by what was called the Arab Spring, but really no longer, because it's going to be at least a decade, whatever it unfolds. But it upended the strategic balance that had dominated the Middle East really for 3 decades in very important ways, and as we know today, with continuing uncertainty. So a lot had happened, which was one reason to dive into the quest. The other thing is that I wanted to widen the focus and not just write about oil, but I wanted to cover the whole spectrum from conventional energy, oil, natural gas, electric power, climate change, the new energies, solar, renewables, the electric car, and kind of see them all in perspective and see if I can put them all together. And so all of that became the basis or the canvas with which I started writing the quest. I have to say it was a personal quest. It took 5 years. I'm notoriously bad planner when it comes to books because I signed a contract saying I would do it in 2 years, and come year 3 or so they start knocking the door and ask where it is. The other thing, it's very challenging to write about a subject this broad, and the way that I've found that I can best tell stories like this is to find what I call the emblematic personalities, who are the people who in one way or the other embody the story or help me carry them. And some of the characters in this book would be completely unknown to you all, and some would be very well known. I thought I'd just talk about a few of them because they help carry the story. There was a professor at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, named R.E. Hagen-Smith, and probably no one in the audience has heard of him because he was there a long, long time ago. He won every chemical prize except the Nobel Prize. People said he should have gotten the Nobel Prize as well. He was obsessed with plants. So he was the one who figured out where the taste came from in onions, in wine, in garlic. He was the one who actually discovered the active ingredients in marijuana, to which there's a legend that there's a statue somewhere in California that's been raised up in his honor. But what he was really obsessed with was the pineapple, and he wanted to understand the flavor of pineapple. Where does that come from? And he was working in his lab one day in 1948 on that very subject, and he decided he wanted to go out for some of that beautiful California air, sort of like this, and he went out, and instead he found himself in what he called a stinking cloud of smog. Interestingly, at that time, no one knew where smog came from. They thought it was from backyard incinerators. He figured out that it came from the incomplete combustion of gasoline in an automobile engine. And, and that started the whole process of reform. A well-known environmentalist named Ronald Reagan established the California Air Resources Board, appointed him as the first head of it. And the California Air Resources Board is the one who started the mandates that really became the basis of the electric car today, that's unfolding today. And so, you know, as part of what I try to do in this book is say, where do things come from? And in a way, the electric car partly comes back from R.E. Hagen-Smith, their experience in 1948. A second character who's very interesting in the book, well, let me put it this way. As you know, a lot of young people have trouble getting jobs today, getting out of school. And this particular young man that I write about had a lot of trouble. He had a very good science degree, but he couldn't get a job. He started offering tutoring, couldn't get any customers, started offering free samples of tutoring, sort of Kaplan-like today, still couldn't get any jobs. His father finally wrote a letter to one of his professors and said, would you please help my son? He grows more and more unhappy day by day, and he believes that his career has been permanently derailed. That was Albert Einstein. Fortunately, he did get a job in the patent office in Bern, in Switzerland. He had a very slow summer, so he wrote 5 papers that changed the course of the world. The one that got the Nobel Prize was the one about photoelectricity. And so that's when he wrote the theory of it and explained it. It took half a century before the first application of solar cells happened, which was in the course of in the aftermath of Sputnik, that in order to power the satellite and the communications, they used photovoltaic cells. So that was 1958. Here we are in 2012, talking about Cylindra, talking about the competitiveness of solar cells. So what is that? That's 107 years. One of the arguments I make in the book is that lead times are very long in terms of energy, and I'd say 107 years is a long time. I'll mention 2 other characters. One of the questions I want to know is kind of where did the modern wind industry come from? Obviously, windmills went back at least 1,000 years to ancient Persia. And so I started to try and find out, how did the wind industry get going? And I found a guy named Jim Delson. And Jim spent New Year's Eve, 1981, not having a party, not having a good time. He spent it on a wind turbine in the Tehachapi Pass in California in a blizzard, trying to get his wind turbine up by midnight. Some of you will know why he wanted to get it up by midnight, because at midnight the tax credits ran out. So this was a tremendous incentive. He did it, got it up, got his tax credits, and then the wind turbine fell apart. So he said there has to be a better way to do this. So he went off to Europe and thought he'd discover the secret in Holland, but instead he ended up in Denmark and found that the sturdy Danish agricultural machinery industry was really good at building wind turbines. So he started importing them into the United States. It turned out that California was the birthplace of the modern wind industry. At one point, 90% of the turbines were from Denmark. So when you say, where did the modern wind industry come from?